In the spring of 1984, Walt Disney Productions was worth less than the dirt underneath its theme parks. The stock was sliding, the films were flopping, and inside the Burbank lot, executives were watching a Wall Street predator circle the company that built American childhood. His name was Saul Steinberg. He didn't care about Mickey Mouse, he cared about breakup value. And for about 90 days that summer, the most beloved brand in America came within a single boardroom vote of being carved up, sold off, and erased. This is the story of how Disney almost got eaten alive, and how a panicked board, a check for $325 million, a Texas oil family, and a brash executive named Michael Eisner pulled the company back from the edge. To understand how close Disney came to disappearing, you have to understand how weak it had become. By 1983, Walt Disney Productions was a company living on fumes. Walt himself had died in 1966. His brother Roy died in 1971. The men running the company in the early 80s were custodians, not creators. The CEO, Ron Miller, was Walt's son-in-law. The chairman, Card Walker, was a Disney lifer who had started in the mailroom in 1938. They were good men. They were also paralyzed by the question that haunted every decision. What would Walt do? The result was a studio frozen in time. The animation department had not produced a genuine hit in over a decade. The Black Cauldron was bleeding money in production. Live-action films like Condorman and Trenchcoat were embarrassments. The theme park still printed cash, but Epcot had cost more than $1 billion to build, and the debt was crushing. By early 1984, Disney's stock had fallen to around $50 a share. Analysts on Wall Street started doing a dangerous kind of math. They added up the value of the film library, the theme parks, the real estate around Orlando, the consumer products division, and they came to a number that was significantly higher than the company's market capitalization. In the language of the 1980s, Disney was undervalued. In the language of the corporate raiders who were rewriting American capitalism, Disney was prey. Saul Steinberg was 44 years old, brilliant, ruthless, and already very rich. He had built a company called Reliance Group Holdings, a sprawling insurance and financial empire he used as a launching pad for hostile takeovers. He had famously tried to take over Chemical Bank in 1969 when he was just 29, and even though that bid failed, it announced him as a new kind of operator. Steinberg did not build companies. He bought weakness. His playbook was simple. Identify a company whose stock was trading below the value of its assets, quietly accumulate shares, announce a tender offer for control, then either take the company over and break it apart or, more often, get paid to go away. That payment had a name. It was called greenmail. In March of 1984, Steinberg began buying Disney stock through Reliance. By June 8th, he had acquired roughly 12% of the company, and he filed a 13D notice with the SEC announcing his intention to seek control. Wall Street understood instantly what this meant. If Steinberg won, he was widely expected to dismantle Disney, sell the film library, sell the music division, sell the real estate around Walt Disney World, which alone was worth a fortune, keep the cash-generating parks, and let the rest die. The Disney brand, as a unified creative enterprise, would cease to exist. Inside Burbank, the panic was real. Ron Miller and the board hired the investment bank Morgan Stanley and the law firm Skadden Arps. They tried a defensive maneuver. Disney announced it would acquire Arvida, a Florida real estate developer, and Gibson Greetings, a card company, paying with newly issued Disney stock. The point was to dilute Steinberg's stake and load up the company with assets he didn't want. Steinberg sued. The shareholders revolted. The Arvida deal went through, but the Gibson deal collapsed, and the defense had failed. On June 11, 1984, Steinberg made it official. He launched a tender offer to buy enough additional Disney stock to take majority control. He had financing lined up from Kurt Kerkorian and from junk bond king Michael Milken at Drexel Burnham Lambert. The Disney board met in emergency session. They had a choice: fight a long, brutal proxy war they might lose, or pay Steinberg to leave. They paid. On June 11th, Disney agreed to buy back all of Steinberg's shares at $77.50 each, plus around $28 million in expenses. The total bill came to approximately $325 million. Steinberg, who had held the stock for only a few months, walked away with a profit of roughly $32 million in cash. To the public, this was theft. Disney was paying a man not to destroy it. Lawsuits flew. Shareholders sued the company, arguing that the directors had wasted corporate assets to protect their own jobs. The term greenmail entered the popular vocabulary, and Disney became its most famous example. The greenmail payment saved Disney from Steinberg, but it left the company wounded, in debt, and still without leadership capable of fixing the underlying business. The raid was over. The crisis was not. Within weeks, another raider, Irwin Jacobs, started accumulating Disney stock and threatened a second takeover attempt. The board realized the truth. Paying off one shark only attracted more. The only real defense was to make Disney valuable again, and that required new management. The rescue came from an unexpected place: Fort Worth, Texas. Sid Bass and his three brothers had inherited a modest oil fortune from their uncle, Sid Richardson, and had grown it into one of the largest private investment empires in America under the guidance of a young financier named Richard Rainwater. The Bass brothers had actually been on the other side of Disney's defensive maneuvers. They owned Arvida, the Florida real estate company Disney had just bought. The acquisition gave the Basses a meaningful stake in Disney, and as Steinberg attacked and Jacobs circled, Sid Bass made a decision. He would not flip his shares, he would buy more. By the fall of 1984, the Bass family had quietly become Disney's largest shareholder, holding around 25% of the company. They were not raiders. They were what Wall Street called a white knight, a friendly long-term investor willing to defend the company against breakup. But Sid Bass had one condition. The old guard had to go. Working with board members Stanley Gold and Roy E., Disney, Walt's nephew who had resigned from the board months earlier in protest of the company's decline, Bass pushed for a leadership change. Ron Miller resigned in September 1984. The hunt for a new CEO began immediately, and the name that emerged was a 42-year-old executive at Paramount Pictures who had a reputation for spotting hits and breaking rules. His name was Michael Eisner. Michael Eisner arrived at Disney on September 22, 1984. As chairman and CEO, he brought with him Frank Wells, a former Warner Brothers executive, as president. Together, they inherited a company in chaos, debt-loaded, demoralized, and recently traumatized by a takeover battle. What they did over the next decade is one of the great corporate turnarounds in American history. Eisner pushed Disney into adult-oriented filmmaking through the Touchstone label, which had been created just before his arrival. Touchstone released Down and Out in Beverly Hills in 1986 and Three Men and a Baby in 1987. Both major hits. He revived feature animation with The Little Mermaid in 1989, Beauty and the Beast in 1991, Aladdin in 1992, and The Lion King in 1994, a run that defined a generation of childhood and is still called the Disney Renaissance. He raised theme park ticket prices aggressively, opened new gates including the Disney MGM Studios in 1989, and pursued international expansion with Tokyo Disney royalties and Euro Disney in 1992. He launched the Disney Channel into homes, opened Disney stores and shopping malls, and turned the company's library into a reoccurring revenue machine through home video. When Eisner took over in 1984, Disney's market value was around $2 billion. By the mid-1990s, it had crossed $28 billion. The same Bass family that had bought in around the takeover saw their stake balloon into one of the most profitable investments of the era. The $325 million greenmail payment, the humiliation of 1984, looked in hindsight like a small price to keep the doors open long enough for new leadership to arrive. The Steinberg raid changed more than Disney. It changed corporate America. Greenmail became so politically toxic that Congress imposed a 50% excise tax on greenmail profits in 1987, effectively killing the practice. State legislatures, including Delaware, where most large companies are incorporated, strengthened anti-takeover protections. Boards adopted poison pills, staggered directors, and other defenses that made hostile bids harder to launch. Saul Steinberg made his money and moved on, attempting raids on other companies, including Quaker State, and eventually suffering a stroke in 1995 that ended his career. He died in 2012. Michael Eisner ran Disney for 21 years, until a shareholder revolt led by Roy E. Disney himself pushed him out in 2005, a strange echo of the way Eisner had arrived. The Bass family eventually sold most of their Disney stake in 2001 to cover margin calls during the dot-com crash, ending one of the greatest investment positions in modern history. But the deepest lesson of 1984 is this: Disney was almost destroyed not because it was a bad company, but because it had stopped being a creative one. The raiders came when the magic stopped. The greenmail bought time. The Bass family bought stability. But what actually saved Disney was the recognition, painful and late, that a company built on imagination cannot be run by people afraid to imagine. The mouse survived because it remembered, just in time, what it was actually for. If this story landed, you'll want to stick around for what's coming next on Boardroom. Boardroom Media. We're working through the great corporate near-death experiences, the moments when companies you think of as permanent came within inches of vanishing. Apple in 1997, IBM in 1993, Marvel's bankruptcy in 1996. Subscribe so you don't miss them. And if you've got a corporate war story you think we should cover, drop it in the comments. The best ones become full episodes. Thanks for watching.